Friends, as we prepare to participate in this service of loss and memory, in this service of comfort for Kathleen's family, I would ask whether you are a guest or a member of the family, if you have one of these with you, it could be a slightly different rectangle that allows you to see pictures of family and get in fights with strangers on the internet and that sort of thing. If you could go ahead and take it out and put it into a silent mode. And even if you think no one's going to call you on a Tuesday morning, even if you think you already did so, go ahead and double check. In this way, we can be fully present, fully focused on Kathleen's family in this time of grief, in this time where the shadow has fallen on their home. We begin with words of the Psalms. We turn to Psalm 121. Lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Esainai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Death has taken our beloved Kathleen. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Kathleen's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for her companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. As a people, we have turned to the 23rd Psalm for comfort, and we know this was a favorite of Kathleen's. I would ask if you know the words to join with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The words of Rabbi Alvin Fine. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach. God is given, God is taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, that there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai Natan, God you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, God you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love, as we now say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach, blessed be the name of God, now and forever. Friends, let's take a moment to pray in silence, and in this silent moment, I would ask if you have a memory that speaks to you profoundly of who Kathleen was in your life, a memory of shared wisdom, of shared joy, of shared beauty, something that inspires you, something that moves you, that elevates you. I ask you to dwell on that memory now as we pray in silence. May the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, my strength and my Redeemer. In our tradition, in Jewish tradition, one of the mitzvot, one of the sacred obligations that we are taught, whose reward is without measure, is levayat hamet, which can be translated as burial of the dead, but it's also understood as comforting the bereaved, comforting those who have lost a loved one. And we do that in a multitude of ways, with our presence here this morning, with the outstretched arm, with the shoulder to lean on, with the word of comfort. And we do it with words of hesped, with words of eulogy, both as the idea that by speaking about the deceased, first of all, we maintain their memory, but also there is this idea, figuratively, not literally, of course, but there is this idea that when we tell stories about those who have passed on, it is as if that person is standing in front of us, if only for the briefest of moments. That person is with us again, with us as we remember them, with us in their vitality, with us in their strength. And so there are a number of people who are going to be remembering Kathleen this morning and speaking about her. Her children, David and Lisa, cousin Susan, and her grandchildren, Ben, Gabriel, Josh, and Jonathan. So I'm going to call them forward to share their eulogies, to share their hesped, to share their Torah.
Well, it's great to see all the faces out there today. I'd like to start by talking about the angels you meet at the end of your life. And it's really not, I'm not talking about the pearly gates. I'm talking about the angels among us. They're over there. And they're the people who took care of my mom in the last 5 years. And, they took care of her, they kept her comfortable, they entertained her, and I think they also got a glimpse of who she was, and fell in love with her because of that. And the thing is, you got a glimpse of who she was. I really believe you did. But if we go and rewind back all the way to where she was born in Hungary, Balashid Yarma, and then she came to America, Philadelphia, and then she met my dad and moved to Wilmington, and then she moved to Geneva, Switzerland, and then back to Wilmington, and then back to Geneva, and then, back here. it really comes down to this. She was an artist. She had an artist's eye. She had an artist's sentiment. She had an artist's heart. And, I think you all saw this. She would do flower cuttings and arrange flowers in certain ways. She would paint on wood, in her travels in Geneva and in Hungary. She would see things and then go back and do that. She would write little poems, actually, when different events in our life happened, for Lisa, for myself, for my dad. And so, she really had that artist's view. If you visited her at Stonegates, where they took incredible care of her, if you visited her cottage, if you went to her house, you could tell, right? She had just an incredible eye for beauty, for, artwork, French hutches, statues. I inherited that one. And other things. She just had this beautiful eye and had a surrounding of just beauty. She was also a shopping artist. Bofskov was her canvas. She knew how to find a really good deal, and but also good taste. And I think that the way she dressed, her jewelry, all that was just really immaculate and beautiful. And of course she also was, she worked her job for 30 years, was at the DuPont Mansion. And if you haven't been there, that is like surrounding yourself in beauty. The artwork there, that's the grounds, everything. And so, she also found a purpose in life, expressing that passion to others as she walked people through that beautiful set of buildings. And and I think the other thing that she definitely had was a real appreciation for the beauty of nature. She'd always look at flowers and talk about them, look at trees. And so again, just that artist's eye, that beauty, that appreciation. And of course, last but not least, an amazing cook. For those of you who had the opportunity to eat her food, whether it was, chicken paprikash or whatever, or some of her pastries, they were just artful and beautiful. And so, in the end, I feel like there's a lot of things she passed on to us, but that piece I feel like she passed on to Lisa here, my sister. She passed on to everybody sitting here, right? And I think she probably passed it on all to you as well. That beautiful view of the world. I certainly feel it every day. And so, if you summarize what that's all about, it's really this. It's that life is not just transactional. Life is not just business. Life is not just surviving. But life is meant to be enjoyed. Life is meant to be embraced. Life is meant to be marveled at, this mystery that we're all in. And above else, life is meant to be loved.
As I held my mother's hand during the last days of her life, I reflected on so many times she held my hand, provided comfort, guidance, and love through my life. When I was looking for a wedding dress, my mom and I went to many bridal shops. I couldn't find anything I loved, so she offered to make the dress for me. I've been sewing for many years, but never sewed a wedding dress. We chose the style together. I went to New York to select the fabric. She spent hours making the dress, which I wore to my wedding here. almost 33 years ago. My mom was always a good judge of character. She surrounded herself with wonderful friends. She treated everyone with respect and dignity. She told me a friend of hers had a great caregiver. When my mom needed more help, I suggested she contact Fran. Fran has been by her side for several years. David and I are forever thankful for all she has done for our mom. 5 years ago, my mom moved into healthcare. She reluctantly accepted that she needed more help and care. She had a loving team of nurses who spent days and nights with her. Thank you to Jessica, Heather, Chris, and all the nurses that made her life better to the very end. Family was very important to my mom. In her final days, the nurses said she was waiting for all her family before dying. Once everyone arrived, and she knew that Josh was flying in, she took her final breath. Thank you. Now my cousin Susan will speak.
Aunt Kathleen and I always had a special bond. I think that's because when I was 4, I was the flower girl in her wedding. But even before that, when I was 6 months old, my parents and my aunt drove cross country to California, and I remember her telling me stories and laughing about how hard it was for me to be that young driving in the car and how she had to change all my diapers. When I was a little older, I remember my mom and I walking up many flights of steps of the hospital where Lisa was born and sneaking on the maternity ward to visit my aunt and newborn Lisa, as the hospital had an age policy, and I was too young to officially visit. I remember driving to Wilmington with my family so many times and having wonderful meals with my aunt, my uncle, Lisa, and David. Their house was beautiful. My aunt was such a wonderful cook, and I loved all her dishes and especially her pastries. We had loud, joyful family get-togethers. Family was everything to her. I know my Aunt Kathleen suffered immensely after my Aunt Agnes and my mom both passed away at such a young age. She was the last surviving member of the Radney family after her mother, my grandmother, Anu, died. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her to go on without her sisters and mother. As the years went by, she continued to have a very special role in my life. I loved hearing her stories that she shared about my mom, my Aunt Agnes, and my grandmother. I always felt that she was the closest connection I had to my mom all these years. She would remind me of things that my mom said or did and would tell me how to cook special Hungarian recipes that my mom used to make. She sensed I needed to hear these stories, and she always seemed to say the right thing to make me feel better. My aunt was a reserved woman, but she had a quiet strength that I think helped her get through many sad times. Later, when she contracted Parkinson's and dealt with so many limitations and obstacles, I always admired her ability to live life with so much dignity and grace, and I never heard her complain, even once. I would visit her at Southgate, and she loved to see the photos of my grandchildren and hear stories about them. She always called them VIPs. I often would tell her that I couldn't believe that I was a grandmother and how fast life was going by. She would give me a motherly smile and nod, and we would commiserate together about how old we felt. I know family was the most important thing to her, as it is with Lisa, Yoav, David, and Paula, and her grandchildren. I love to hear her talk about all your travels, all your ventures, all your vacations. You gave her so much pleasure, and she was so proud of all of you. And so the circle of life continues. The children of Agnes, Eva, and Kathleen are getting older, and their children are getting married and are starting to have their own children. And when Lisa and Yoav got married, my daughter Eve was the flower girl at their wedding. My Aunt Kathleen will have a very special place in my heart, and I will always be grateful for her filling in those times that I needed her the most.
I was extremely fortunate to get to know my grandmother into my adult life. And when I look back, I am so grateful to have had the memories of every summer. My brother and I would each go and spend a week in Delaware with her and my grandfather. And I look back so fondly on those times when she would make just the most amazing meals of chicken paprikash with nikoli, or her famous breaded chicken. And I always had such a wonderful time with them, and felt that she was always so caring and so loving and so nourishing. And I remember every meal afterwards we would sit down and watch our Jeopardy and Seinfeld and sit around laughing and hearing such beautiful stories from them. I remember when I brought my now fiance Elaine to visit her at Stonegates when we drove from college, and she was so proud of me and so happy to meet Elaine, and treated her with the same love and kindness that she treated us all with throughout our life and childhood. And while her last several years were difficult, she still always approached it with kindness and positivity. And I'd like to second some of my mom and David in saying thank you so much to all of you so much for helping her and making the end of her life so much better than it could have been, and treating her with so much respect and love, and talking to her like a friend, and treating her so kindly. So thank you. I'll miss her very much.
I also want to echo the remarks Jonathan just made, and thank you all so much for taking care of her. Our Nana, she was a beautiful soul, a woman of poise, a woman who took care of everyone, who fed us well, but she also made sure we were making our beds in the morning, and that the ties on our suits were looking very sharp as well. And Nana always looked sharp too. It's especially clear by looking at the old photos you will see today of her, the woman she had class. If she was skiing in the slopes of Switzerland or visiting her children, she looked like a movie star alongside my grandfather, Imrich. She usually was donning a pair of beautiful sunglasses, a pocketbook, and a wonderful sweater that was very colorful and beautiful. And speaking of clothing, I have a quick story I'd like to tell about my grandmother that I remember her telling me just a few years ago. She and Imrich and the family had just moved to Geneva, and apparently my Nana was just starting to learn French. She was just starting to become familiar with it. And she was walking into a department store looking to buy some brown socks. But her rudimentary French didn't really serve her so well that day. And instead of asking the woman at the front, "Do you have some brown socks I can purchase?" she asked the woman, "Can I purchase your brown socks?" And as you can imagine, the woman was a little bit confused that day. We have flown from all corners of the country today, and even the world in some cases, to honor our Nana. From Paris, Santa Cruz, California, Connecticut, Seattle, San Francisco, Colorado, and other places as well to celebrate her. And that truly is the symbol and the testament to what our Nana and Papa created. And we love her so much.
I also want to thank you. Our family is forever grateful for all of you and the care that you took of Nana. So thank you. Today, I really want to share a few of my favorite memories of Nana. First, as we all know, her cooking was just incredible. Specifically, a Hungarian meal called Savanyú Kapusτα, my personal favorite. She tried to teach me as a young child. My version did not come out as well, to say the least, but she was always very encouraging. Her meals were always just incredibly delicious and extremely hearty, and it was the perfect meal to come home to after a long day of running around outside with my cousins. As mentioned before, we all know Nana had an impeccable fashion sense. She was a legendary shopper. She had strong opinions about what was fashionable and what was a fashion disaster as well. And I loved that about her. She never hesitated to let us know her thoughts. She was the ultimate fashion guru, and we were so lucky to have her guidance. So she loved shopping, but the dollar store had a very special place in her heart. She once said to my dad and I, "You should always invest in the dollar store because even in bad economic times, people will always still shop there." I remember when my brother and I were younger, she brought us to the dollar store and she told us, "You can go and pick out any 3 items you want." This blew my mind. And we continued that tradition for many years. But the thing I most remember about my Nana is that she adored and loved her family. She was the most caring and loving Nana. She was beyond proud of her family that her and Papa created. And I know that seeing all her grandchildren today, where they've ended up with all of our incredible partners and future spouses, she would be incredibly proud. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you all for coming today. Not to echo too many sentiments, but thank you all for everything. Yeah, every time I would visit, just seeing how well she was taken care of by all of you and so many more just really means the world to all of us. And all of you who came are blood family or family, period. So thank you all. I know, as many have said, family has been very important to her. And I think a big reason for that is because of her upbringing. You know, her family had to flee from Hungary when she was just a few years old. And as sort of reflecting on her life and on, thinking about you all growing up in Geneva with her and Papa, I think if I were to guess, it was a big part of, because her and Papa's childhoods were really stolen from them, from the Nazis, and I would imagine they wanted to give you a piece of that and enjoy Europe and enjoy maybe, what their childhoods there could have been like. And I think, there's just, maybe I should pull out my notes because I know there was a couple things I did want to say. I might be rambling a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, I know as I look at all of you, as I look at all four of our beautiful partners, as I look at everyone who was able to be here today, I know that you're all carrying a piece of her with you. And, her devotion to family, her cooking, her eye for design, as others have mentioned. I think her elegance, just her ability to carry herself, including in these past years where it's been really hard, has just been really inspiring. It's something that I know I certainly want to carry on in my own life, and just have so many great memories with her over the years. Going to Club Tremblant in Canada in the summers, as Jonathan mentioned, we would spend a week at her house and just have amazing times with her and Papa. Going to Delaware Speedway to watch the horse races there. Gambling when I'm pretty sure we were not of age. And just really having amazing times with her. And she just always cared so much about everybody, about all of us, about all of you. And I hope we can all, carry that piece of her with us going forward. Thank you.
Yasher Koach to each of you, may your strength abide and continue. We are, all of us, so glad that you shared your memories of our beloved Kathleen, of your beloved Kathleen, in this space, a space that she was regularly in, that was hers in so many ways. It was long before I got here 14 years ago. She would be a presence here on Friday nights at the helping out with the garage sale that the sisterhood would put on, being here and present with so many other friends of theirs who have gone on before, the Bodnars, the Schenkers, the Katzes, and others who shared that same refugee, that same immigrant experience. When we read our Torah portion this week, we read about memory. We're commanded in this week's portion at the very, very end to wear tzitzit, to wear fringes on the corners of our garments. David, you had your grandfather's talit with you. Her father's talit? Her father's talit with you, which still has the tzitzit tied on those corners, those special fringes. And not just as decoration, we're commanded that by wearing them, we will remember the mitzvot. We will remember our sacred obligations. Kathleen, in so many ways, reminded all of us, Susan, you captured her her spirit and her personality so beautifully, as being a little formal in her presentation, but always kind and loving and committed, not just to taking care of those who loved her, but doing what was right and what was important. And so in many ways, she was tzitzit for her family and for this congregation. She was a reminder of what our obligations were and what we were supposed to do. And now it's up to all of us to be able to remember her, to hold that memory in our hearts, to carry her with us, to find our own tzitzit, our own remembrance of her, so that we can continue to live into that memory and let that memory be an inspiration for all of us. In our tradition, there are two prayers we say over one who has passed on. The first one is called El Male Rachamim. Physically, spiritually, I invite you to rise for that prayer. El Male Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hametzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kroshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia, Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Yakirenu Shalacha Lolama, Bal Harachamim, Yastireha Beseter Knafav Lolamim, Vitzuror Bitzur Chaim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hunachalata, V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Kathleen Greschler, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. Friends, if you did not have an opportunity to sign the register book upon entering the sanctuary, you are welcome to do so at the conclusion of this service, which will be in a few moments. Immediately following this service, we will be going in cortege and funeral procession to Beth Emeth Memorial Park for interment. All who are participating in that should drive with their four-way flashers on. If you're part of the procession, make sure you have your high beams on and your four-way flashers. Immediately following that service at the cemetery, we will be returning here back to Beth Emeth, Congregation Beth Emeth, the 300 Wesley Boulevard, for a meal of condolence and an opportunity to be with Lisa and David and their families and Kathleen's extended family to offer them support. The following individuals are designated as pallbearers. When you hear your name, I'm going to ask you to come forward. If I mispronounce your name, I apologize in advance. We call forward Kathleen's son-in-law, Yoav, daughter-in-law, Paula, and her grandsons, Ben, Gabrielle, Josh, and Jonathan. Surely the